So we're just got back to Atlanta, and it's nice being in Florida, seeing some people. And anyway, so I was thinking what to do today, and I had discussed a little bit with you the book of Jonah, and I did it because as I said, Jonah is sort of the prophet of the nations, because I mean he is obviously a Jewish prophet, but he was commanded to speak to the nations. So I thought what would be a nice thing to do is to actually go through the book of Jonah together a little bit, and go through the chapters of it. It's a very short book, only a few chapters. And in a few weeks, we can cover it and have some discussion about some of the amazing things in this story. Now, I just have to give up some prefaces to understand some of the ideas when you're learning a text in Torah. First of all, this was told to me by someone who converted by me, whose family were pastors and this and that, and he explained to me that in Christianity they come out with different versions of the Bible. I didn't know that, but they come out with different translations like that. You can't do that in Torah. Now, why can't you do that? Because this is very important to understand. And this is a very deep concept, but I have to explain it to you. The Torah is not a book. It's not a book. What the Torah is God taking infinity and putting it into the finite. Now, what does that mean? I think I'm disconnecting a little bit. Let me just plug in I see I'm not plugged in fully. Just plug in here am I coming through okay, Dan?
Yeah, I'm getting you all right.
All right.
You're bouncing around a bit, so your camera's trying to focus.
Yeah, all right. So if I'm we'll leave it. So what does that mean, taking the infinite, putting it to the finite? It's not like you could translate and change the words. Every single letter in the Torah is teaching you infinite concepts. As a matter of fact, the first 7 words of the Torah, of the beginning of Genesis, is the beginning of creation. Okay, it's all of the 6,000 years that we're in now to the 7,000 millennium. It's all contained in the first word. That's why the first word of the Torah, there are sages who take the first 6 letters of the Torah, they flip them around in every way to show you all 613 commandments in the first word of the Torah. These guys did something a number of years ago. These two, people have tried to repeat it, and it could be misused very much, but it's the idea of codes. So these two professors in Bar Ilan put the Torah through through a computer, and they found all of these incredible things. Like there's a whole section about where it says God will heal you. And I've seen this, and if you go, you count certain amount of letters and certain amount of numbers and up and down and across. It's like every disease that there is today is in the portion about where God will heal you from all diseases. And so people can make things up with putting things in random computers, but that's not what it is. Everything in the Torah is infinite. And therefore, it just goes on forever. So, for example, there's something called gematria. I mentioned to you before. Gematria is the numerical value of every letter. And it's not an accident. The concepts all add up. And therefore, you could have one word here. The numerical value will teach you something else onto another word that has the same numerical value. So everything in the Torah is that the word of God is not just, you can't loosely translate it. So when I'm going to read to you the book of Jonah, I'm not going to do it in the Hebrew, obviously, now, but you have to understand it's a very different thing. When I learn it in the holy language, I change that. I didn't say Hebrew now. The reason why I didn't say Hebrew is because modern Hebrew is a little different than the holy language. The holy language of biblical Hebrew is a little bit changed as modern Hebrew. There's certain concepts that when Hebrew became a modern language, the people who developed it, more this guy Eliezer ben Yehuda, what happened was he had to make it a modern language. This was the holy language, and therefore, for example, I'll just give you an example. You know how Eskimos have like 23 words for snow, right? Because this is something they deal with. In the holy language, there are many words for happiness, because there are so many different concepts of happiness. Simcha, Sasan, Gila, Ditza, Chid, Varina. There's so many, and they're all slightly different. At the same time, the holy language doesn't have words that are gross, coarse words. They don't exist, because those concepts are not in the essence of what remains. So, for example, now when Hebrew was made into a modern day language, so what happened was they had all these modern things they had to give concept to. So, for example, this one's not good. This one's not good. But if you go to Israel today and you want to say electricity, the word's chashmal. That's the modern Hebrew word for electricity. The problem is that that's not only sort of a misnomer, but it's very misleading, because the word chashmal appears in the vision of Ezekiel and Yecheskel, and it's referring to spiritual beings, angels they call in English, that he sees that sort of speak lighting up the sky in some sense. So now what they did in modern Hebrew is they looked, oh, this is lighting up things. We have this concept of electricity, so they called it chashmal. So it's not exactly the same. It helps. People that speak Hebrew are easier to read the Torah, which is written in Hebrew, but we're talking about in the holy language. In the holy language, everything is here. Every innuendo is implied. So we're going to do this in general. Maybe one time we'll merit to be able to read it together fully and to see each nuance and what it means. But right now, I'm going to give you the general in the book of Jonah. I'm going to talk about the story. We'll do is 4 chapters. We'll do 1 chapter a session, and we'll cover this concept. I think is very relevant to people in the world today. Any questions before I begin on Jonah?
No, sir.
Okay. So it starts. God spoke to Jonah. Yonah. I'm going to use the Hebrew word now, which is Yonah. For some reason, in English, they translate all of the Yud sounds, the Y sounds to J, which can be very confusing, as we're going to see in a moment. I will see it right now, because who is Jonah? Who is this person? Who is he? Well, he was a great righteous person, that we know. But as was mentioned once before, his story is a very unusual story, because Eliyahu Hanavi, which again, they call in English from Elijah, I think they call Eliyahu, which is confusing because, right? Eliyahu, I think in English is called Elijah. Yes. But it's a little confusing because his student's name is Elisha. So I don't know what they call that in English. I don't actually know how they do that. So I'm going to stick with the biblical names, Eliyahu, right, which they call in English Elijah. And he had a student named Elisha. So Eliyahu Hanavi in the story, Eliyahu the prophet, is a story in the book of Kings where Eliyahu Hanavi, during the famine, he comes and he's hosted by this widow who has a child. And an amazing story there. Eliyahu tells her she has no food, and he says, "Don't worry," and he gives her a whole way that is, she tells her the whole way that she's blessed with food. She has to have vessels. Now, but she basically Eliyahu Hanavi she hosts him, and Eliyahu Hanavi does certain miracles, and God gives her food, and she was very destitute, and she had a widow, and she had a son. The son then died at some point, and she was very upset. And she said to Eliyahu, "Listen, you came here beforehand. I was considered to be a righteous person. Now you're here in this town, and now maybe that's why this happened to me, because now I'm not looking so great anymore compared to you. I'm nothing." Eliyahu takes the child, and the famous story there, he prays and he breathes into his mouth. It's not, those who want to translate it as resuscitation. It's not what it is. It's a spiritual thing, although the breath obviously connects to the idea of the soul. But Eliyahu prays to Hashem, and the child comes back to life. And that's the story in the book of Kings, which obviously is a major thing, because the key to bringing someone back life to death is not something that God gives to human beings. In this case, he did give it to Eliyahu Navi and allowed him to bring this child back to life. That child is Jonah. So this is a very unusual person right now. This person was dead and came back to life. He's seen everything. It's incredible. Now, Jonah is going to be then a student of, when he grows up, of Eliyahu's student called Elisha. And he was a prophet, and Elisha even sent him to do certain things. He sent him as a messenger to anoint King Yehu and various other things, and he was a prophet. And now God speaks to Jonah. Okay, so Jonah is this prophet, and now this is the book of Jonah, and God's speaking to Jonah. And God says to him, "Kum lechol, go to Nineveh, the Ir HaGadol, the great city, and call to it, call out, because their evil has come before me." And God says, you have to go and tell them that they are evil. And God tells Jonah to go to this city of Nineveh, the non-Jewish city outside the land of Israel. Vayakam Yonah levrach Tarshisha. Jonah gets up and he wants to run away to this place called Tarshish from before God. He wants to run away from God. Now, that's a big problem. Why is it a problem, everybody?
You can't get away.
You can't run away from God. Where are you going to run? Can't do that. So what does he want to run away? So here's what happened here. So we mentioned last time, Jonah does not want to do this messengership. He doesn't want to go. Why does he want to go? And we said last time, the idea is that Jonah knows that God is compassionate. And when God is going to send him to Nineveh and tell them Nineveh is in trouble, they'll repent and Nineveh won't be destroyed. So why is that so bad? That's great. Why does Jonah not like that idea? It's a fantastic idea. Imagine today if I can get online and I can go and tell everyone in the world, you got to change your ways. The world is falling apart. Don't you see what's going on? People are crazy. They don't know they don't know what's their left and their right. They don't know anything. People are more confused today than they were in the time of Nineveh. Right? Nineveh, they didn't know. It said they didn't know. God said they didn't know, but they didn't know what they were doing. But I think they were more aware of reality than our world today. So if I can get on the computer, tell everyone in the world that God says you must change and accept that there's a God in the world and there's truth and righteousness in the world. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen? They're going to blow up trains in East Palestine. Who knows what they're going to do? They're going to have spy balloons coming across. They're going to send, diseases. Who knows? And if I could tell people that something is going to happen and it's going to be serious and you got to change, and everyone's going to change, I'd be the happiest guy in the world. Wouldn't you? So why does Jonah not want to do this? So there's numerous answers. One answer he said last time is that Jonah knows that sometimes people are affected externally, right? If I tell you, you have to do this or else, you might do it, but you still don't want to do it. And therefore, once the force, the coercion is gone, the will is gone. And Jonah said, this is going to be a facade. These people, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to go. They're going to get scared. they're going to say, all right, we want to change, but they're not going to really change. And then they're going to revert back to what it was. And then God's going to cancel the decree he did against them. Now, that will not look good for the Jewish people, because the Jewish people were, during this time, not being so great. But it's more than just it wouldn't look good for them. It's that he knew that the Jewish people were that, as the text says, they can be stiff-necked. Jewish people can be stiff-necked. And I've talked to you about that also. I need to explain that to you, because we see sometimes, the Jewish people, there are the very, very righteous people who you don't always see because they don't come and speak out in the world. And then there are the guys running around who have these crazy ideas who you hear about. They're the minority, but the righteous people, the tremendously righteous people, you don't hear about. So they're sometimes they're stiff-necked. They think they're right. They have very strong opinions. So Jonah said, this is not going to be right. God's sending me on a messengership. I'm going to go and say, change or else. They'll say, yes, we want to change. They're going to fake it. On the outside, they'll change. Inside, they're not going to change. And that will not shed light, good, positive light on the Jewish people who are more, they can be stiff-necked, but when they do change, they really change. And I know these people are not going to really change. That's what he felt. So Jonah didn't want to go. It also will make Jonah look like a false prophet. Why? Because Jonah's going to go, say, Nineveh is going to be destroyed. They'll repent. And then what happens? God's going to save them. They're going to say, oh, you see how the way people are, if something happens, if God forbid you're having a problem, and you might pray to God and say, listen, if this just gets better, I'll become different. And then after it happens, you're like, it was probably going to get better anyway. That's human nature, So they're going to say, no, it wasn't because we repented. The reason why, maybe it was a fake prophecy. It's not real. So Jonah does not really want to go and do this, okay? But now I need to discuss with you a moment this idea of prophecy, okay? Dan, if my system is not going well, tell me. I'll plug in the Ethernet.
No, you're crystal clear, Rabbi.
Okay, so now let me talk about prophecy a second, because how do you know who's a true prophet? If this is true that Jonah's going to come and tell them that there's a prophecy, something's going to happen to them, and then afterwards they repent and the prophecy won't happen. So how do you know when someone's a real prophet and not a real prophet? Very important question, ladies and gentlemen, because there are such things as false prophets, and it needs to be really guarded against. I mean, not today, because today everyone claims the prophet's not a prophet. But so how do you understand this? Do you have any ideas? So let me tell you some rules here. There are rules to this. Some of the rules will affect various things that we've discussed in the past. If somebody comes, again, today prophecy has ceased. God removed prophecy during the time of the Second Temple. So there are no prophets today. If someone claims to be a prophet, that's not true, because God removed prophecy in the time of the Second Temple. There are wise people who, through their understanding of Torah, can sometimes intuit, understand things that will be somewhat prophetic. I've seen that. I've seen that from the great sages of Israel. But it's not called prophecy. It's wisdom. It's wisdom that's on a high level. But when there was, before the time of the Second Temple, there was prophets. I don't know if you know how many prophets there were, because in the Torah it lists a certain number. There's 49 prophets that are discussed, but really there were over 1 million prophets, throughout the time of Jewish history. Right? There were 600,000 male and 600,000 female prophets. Prophecy was fairly common from the time of Shmuel, time of Samuel. There were students that learned prophecy. Why are these prophets written down, other ones are not? The answer is that prophecy was only written down for when the prophecy was relevant for the future, for posterity. If a person had a prophetic vision and God showed him something about himself, or God taught him something, or he had an experience of God in a certain way, that's individual. That was not recorded in the Tanakh, in the Torah. What was codified by the men of the Great Assembly as the 24 books of the Torah, those were the prophecies that were given that were meant to last forever. They're relevant to us today. Okay? So the prophets there were a lot of people that were prophets. How can you tell who's a phony baloney? I mean, I just imagine a world where every nut job is walking around saying he's a prophet. I used to live in Jerusalem. There was something called Jerusalem syndrome, which is that you go there. There's some people. I remember there's a guy, he used to wear a little crown. He was from Australia. He couldn't play the harp, but he would strum it, and he said he's King David. So he wasn't King David. He'd still be as a prophet, but unfortunately, he needed help. He needed medication. So the prophet, how do you know a real prophet? There's certain signs. First of all, it should be someone that is very righteous. He has to be righteous. He has to be someone that is known to be a holy, righteous person.
Rabbi, we lost your microphone a little bit there. You dropped it in half. Your volume went down by 50%.
Oh, wow. Is it better now or worse?
Well, it's on par. If you got to speak firm though.
I'm trying to raise it now. Is it better or worse now?
That's okay. That's good. That's broadcastable. Okay.
So he needs to be known as a righteous person. That's one. Two, there are other certain signs certain other signs of prophecy. I'm going to not get into the whole thing now, but the one I want you to know about, he can never say anything that contradicts the Torah, which knocks out now the many religions that came along and changed the Torah. Because if a prophet comes along and says God changed one commandment of the Torah, he is a false prophet. That is stated clearly in the Torah. It says, if he comes along and says changes any law, Baal Tigra, Baal Tosif, don't adds or subtracts any law, then he is not a real prophet. Now, the third thing you have to know, which is relevant for our topic now, is that if the prophet says something that's going to happen and it doesn't happen, he's a false prophet. But wait a minute. So how do you deal with the story of Yonah? The answer is that a prophecy for good will never be repealed. Understand this? God wants to give us good. The point of challenges and suffering in our life is not the challenge and suffering. It is for our good. So when a prophecy comes out for the positive, that can never be revoked. So a prophet comes along and says something good's going to happen and it doesn't happen, it's a false prophet. If a prophet comes along and says something bad's going to happen and it doesn't happen, that doesn't mean he's a false prophet. Because exactly the story of Nineveh. God said, there's going to be a calamity if you guys don't change. It's a warning. And once they change, so then there is the prophet, the decree is revoked. Okay? But Yonah was concerned. Yonah had prophesied something in the land of Israel also, and the Jewish people repented and it was revoked. So Jonah was concerned, but that wasn't the main reason. It's a side reason. But the main reason Jonah was concerned because he felt this was not going to bode well. It was not going to look true. It would make the Jewish people not look proper because he felt their repentance wouldn't go and be so good. But ladies and gentlemen, I got to ask a question. How can he run away from God? There's another law that if a prophet is commanded to give a prophecy, he's not allowed not to do it. So how in the world could Jonah say God sends him on this to be his messenger and he said, I don't want to do it? That's forbidden. How could Jonah do that? And the answer is, if you look at the words, it says that God told to Jonah to go and to call to them that they're evil. In the first statement that God gave to Jonah, there was not a decree yet to go and to prophesize to them that this will happen, this will be the result. In the first step, what happened was God said, just give them rebuke. That wasn't the prophecy. The prophecy is going to happen later. The first step was God said, okay, you, Jonah, you're a sage, you're a rabbi. You need to go, as the text says, and tell them that they're being evil. So you know what Jonah said? He said, I got to run away, because if I wait any longer, what's going to happen is that God is going to make it a commandment to me and give me the prophecy. I'll have to give it. So how can he run away from God? I can't run away from God. You know what the answer is, ladies and gentlemen? Prophecy was only in the land of Israel. Jonah thinks he'll leave the land of Israel. Okay? Sound good?
Yes, sir.
Now, there's going to be an exception, which we're going to see, which is that if someone had prophecy before, they can have prophecy later. What's going to happen with Jonah? Jonah tries to go, he goes down to Yaffo. Yaffo is in Israel, and he wants to get this boat. And it says that he gives the money for the boat. Now, it's a very unusual term there. He gives the money to the boat. The answer was, the truth was, what happened was he actually paid for the entire boat. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to get out fast. He wanted to leave the land of Israel quickly before God spoke to him again. If he would wait around for the people, as they did in those days, you had a boat. You got, one person, let's say you had 100 people in the boat. You wait to get 100 passengers and then you sailed. You might be there for a while. Jonah was a wealthy person, which was also one of the things the prophets were. And he rented the whole boat. Okay? And he starts going out on the boat to this place called Tarshish. In verse 4, then afterwards God brought a tremendous storm. And the boat was going to break. The boat looked like it was going to be destroyed. Verse 5, it says, the sailors saw, and they called out to their own gods. And they took the vessels and they threw it overboard. Right? Now, these guys sound really religious. Right? They have the wrong religion, but they were like, they're going to say in a minute, who's the cause of this? Right? You're going to see in a few seconds.
Superstitious.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very strange that they were so religious, Now, it's true. And you have to understand this in society, and I mentioned this to you before. Aldous Huxley once said about Darwin, that Darwin gave atheists a leg to stand on, because in the ancient world, atheism was not the belief. That wasn't the belief. That was absurd. That's why he said Darwinism, to say, to create this idea that it evolved. Okay, if you ask too many questions, well, how did the first prebiotic soup get there? You run into problems. So there's a lot of problems with the fact of evolution, because there's so many holes in it. It's like Swiss cheese. But the idea before that was people believed that there was a source. Or they believed in powers, but they were also superstitious because they believed in the idolatrous powers of the world. But it's interesting to note, because today, atheism, has become a very common belief. That wasn't a common belief in the old days. You believed in your power, and they were superstitious in that sense. But they believed in something. But you're going to see these people are very strange. It's like they say, who is this happening because of? It was like as if they really are tuned in. I want to tell you why. And this is the most amazing thing. It says that they saw the other boats around them were sailing fine. The storm was happening in their reality. You have to understand this. It's a very, very amazing thing. What happens is that people think, like there's a story in the Torah where it says by Joshua that he made the sun stand still. So I heard a person, he's a scientist, a Jewish scientist, and he wanted to claim this was connected with the very long night they found in the southern hemisphere. The sun really stood still. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's correct. I can't be sure he's wrong, but I don't think it's correct. There is a source that says this. Maral says that it happened to Joshua in his world. People misunderstand that when God controls anything, controls everything. It's like, oh, he stops the sun. And this is like the childish beliefs that people have, why they make religion into like fairy tales. He stopped the sun, he held the sun, and therefore it was very dark. No, it's not what happened. The world was going as it was. In their reality, the sun stood still. Same thing here. In the reality of these people, they saw all around them something weird happening. The boats were not in the storm. They were in a storm somehow. Wherever they went, they were trapped. They knew there was something supernatural going on here. Isn't that amazing? That's how it happened. Okay, what happens is Jonah now goes, it says, he goes down to the bottom of the ship and he goes to sleep. Now that's weird. That's very weird. First of all, that's like the worst place to go. Because when the water starts coming in the bottom, it starts breaking, that's the place where you're going to be finished first. That's one of the reasons he did it. Jonah was ready to give up his life at this point. And it's also one of the reasons he bought the ship. He didn't want a lot of people coming on the ship with him. He knew they might be in danger. Jonah said, if I go down the bottom and he gets killed, then the storm will stop. So he goes down, he goes to sleep. Now comes along the captain and says, what are you sleeping? Get up and crawl out to your God. Okay. Now it says afterwards that everyone went and they said, listen, let's draw lots and see who is the cause of this. Because I told you before, they realized something supernatural is happening. They kept drawing lots. And every time they drew a lot, it fell on Jonah. So they said to him, tell us. In verse 8, they said, tell us, why is this? Why is this happening to us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What's your land? What nation are you from? They asked him all these questions because they were trying to figure out, like, why is this happening? What is it? Your people were bad? Is it that you're bad? What's your job? What's the cause of this? So now he tells them. He says, I am an Ivri. I'm a Jewish person, and the God of the heavens I fear, who made the Yam, made the sea and the land. And he tells them that this is happening because of him. Now the people get very, very scared. They're very sad. Okay, because he told them he's running away from God. Okay, so now so he says to him, they say in verse 11, what should we do that the sea is going to stop? So he says, throw me overboard. Now it says they didn't want to do it. They were afraid. He told them he's a prophet. They're going to kill a prophet of God. So they try to go and get back to land, but you can't fight God. It's absurd. But they try to go back to land. They can't get there. So now they call out to God and they say, in verse 14, Ana Hashem, please God, let us not be lost for this person. Okay? Because don't give us innocent blood on our hands, because this is what you want. It says that they were taking Jonah and they started to put him into the water. They put his toes in the water and the storm stopped. They pulled him out, the storm started again. They put him in more again, stopped. So they had no choice. They realized it. And then at the end, they threw him overboard. They had no choice. And it says now the sea stopped from Mizapo, from its storming. And now, end of chapter 1, the people, Vayiru Anashim Yuragu, they had tremendous awe of God. And they brought offerings, Vaidanadar, and they actually went and they converted. These people, their lives changed entirely. Could you imagine seeing such a thing? What would you do? What would you do if you saw God working miracles? And I've said to you this before, it's really important because we don't see overt miracles anymore. And that was intentional. The way God set the world up was there was a period of time where God showed his calling card, and he showed that he runs the world, story of the Exodus of Egypt, giving the Torah. But the world now is in the state of hidden miracles. The job is to find God. And the hardest part is sometimes we have a hidden miracle in our lives, and what happens is we for a moment, feel excited, and then we go back to sleep. You know, that's what the guy said to him. Jonah, what are you sleeping? Wake up. I'm not going to do this with you because it's very deep, but there's so many levels of the Torah. There's levels this is talking about. The story has a level that talks about the soul. I'm not going to get into that now with you, but the concept of these people seeing this miracle that changed them. How many people in our lives do we see things that it shakes us up, and for a moment we think we're going to change, and then we fall back asleep? And that's the hard job. That's the job of spiritual living. The job of spiritual living is to see the hidden miracles in our lives and to find a way to work and to keep it going, that it motivates us. You know, in Hebrew, the word for a habit is called hergel. Hergel is the same word as regel, of legs, feet. Because when you walk, you don't think about it. There's a part of us that, and if God forbid someone had a stroke or something terrible like that, they have to think about walking. It's the worst thing. There's certain aspects of our lives that happen automatically. That represents the idea of our legs. We go. But falling into habit is the danger, because if you fall into habit, I always think, I think I told you this once, right? I used to live in an apartment building in Israel. And I remember going out with my kids, you know, and pressing the elevator button, and then the elevator opens and you go in and you go down with the kids. And I remember thinking to myself once, could you imagine if you never saw an elevator, what that would mean for you? Imagine you went back in time, or somebody went in time travel from the 1500s, and they came to today, and you show them, yes, I press on this point in the wall, and now I'm transported to a new place. This is the craziest thing I ever saw. The guy touched the wall, and all of a sudden he's in a new place. It's like Star Trek. It's like getting beamed up and beamed down. Oh, what is this? But when a kid sees it every day, when you see it from your child, it doesn't faze you. It doesn't faze you. And it's an amazing thing. I'll tell you something. It's so fascinating. You know, when you see if you ever watch a National Geographic, you'll see like a baby horse, and they're born, and after a couple seconds, they're trotting around like a horse. The only creation that is born completely incapacitated, dysfunctional, cannot do anything on their own is really a human being. They ease into it. Because if a human being was born and saw this world as it is, two things would happen. Either they would freak out, they'd lose their mind, what's going on? Either that, or alternatively, they would be so amazed and so awestruck by what they're seeing that they could never believe something this happened by accident. The reason you can believe it happened by accident is because, you're used to it. Yeah, I see. I saw the sun rose yesterday, rose today. Yeah, I have. There's. I mentioned Darwin before, but there's a book called I think it's the Little Black Box by this guy Michael Bevy. Bevy, I think his name is, and he is a what is that? He's I forgot what it's called, a microbiologist, but he explains that how Darwin didn't understand the complexity of the human being on the molecular level. So, like, if you talk about an evolutionary process, you could talk about, there was a bicycle, You know, you had a skateboard, you evolved to a bicycle, and it evolved from a bicycle to a motorcycle, from a motorcycle to a car. That's very nice. But if you understand the complexity of a motorcycle, you understand it can't evolve from that, you know, bicycle to a motorcycle. If you understood the complexity of how it works, I'm not going to evolution, but just understand it. It's like you know, there's you know, snakes, venomous snakes. There is like, I think 52 different processes they need to have that the venom will not kill them. So from a non-venomous snake to a venomous snake, there is many processes. How did that evolve slowly over time? As soon as he got the venom, he's dead. He needs that. So when you don't understand what's going on in the world, you could say theoretically, yeah, thing could evolve. But if something has to happen, all 52 processes need to happen simultaneously. It can't evolve like that. So if a person saw the world as it really is, they would be awestruck. But we fall asleep. And these people, these sailors, what they saw, that what Jonah told them, what Jonah said to them, that God runs the world. He created the world. He's the master of the world. And they saw with their own eyes, these people, it says they made vows. You know why they made a vow? You know what they made a vow for? Because they even understood that if I don't go and concretize this thing now and say, I'm going to do this no matter what, when I get back to shore, I'm going to forget. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an important thing for us. We got to realize we have to go and see the things in our lives, see the hidden miracles, and to be a spiritual human being, to work at making ourselves alive, renewing ourselves, not falling asleep at the wheel. And that's the beginning part of what I wanted to get from this first lesson, the first chapter of Yonah, and this amazing story, and seeing how people, you know, could change, but how they forget. And this is, we're going to go through the whole book, God willing, and we'll tie it to modern day times, and what shakes people up, what doesn't shake people up. And we'll see that this is a process of human being. And the last thing I want to just end with was what I said before, last time we discussed this. That's why when you have an external motivation to change, as we're going to see, it doesn't last. You need to translate the external motivation to something internal. So if you're dieting because the doctor said you have to, that's great. That's great. That's a good start. At a certain point, you have to realize this is what I need to do. When the doctor just scared you, as soon as you forget about it, you won't do it. So when you realize that God says there's a way to act, it's a way to be, and the first step, yeah, it could be that as the beginning steps are, I have to do it. But then you have to realize this is good for me. This is what I want to do. That's the turning point when a person becomes a spiritual person, when it's not external, but it becomes internal, because I realize this is the way the world is built, and this is the way I'm built, and this is what's best for the world and for myself too. Okay, thoughts, ideas, comments?